after years of therapy, I still see horrendous shadows in the dark. My parents say it's because my imagination is too wild. I beg to differ because everything that my eyes saw on the 23rd of September was real. Don't call me crazy till you hear my story. My family moved to a quiet town 6 years ago because my parents had made a bad investment that rendered their company bankrupt. I still remember the tears streaming down my mom's cheeks when she broke the news to me. I didn't want to leave the place I had called home for most of my childhood, but my parents assured me that I would love this new town. They had no idea that the hope they built in me would be cut short by the heavy darkness that surrounded our new home. My first few months in Cave Town were actually better than I expected. My parents enrolled me in a school nearby, and I quickly began to open my heart to new friends. Our neighbor's youngest son, Danny, quickly became my best friend. He had come with his mom to give us a pie on the first day we moved in, and I instantly felt a connection between us. His family came over to visit mine again a few weeks after, and surprisingly, we all bonded and our parents quickly became close friends. So close that they trusted the neighbors to look after me on the 23rd of September, the day my nightmares began. "Mom, I can't stay here alone," I screamed as tears rolled down my eyes. I didn't understand why my parents had to go on a 2-day trip without me. They said I had to stay because of school. Really? Why was this happening to me right after I started hearing weird sounds outside my bedroom window? I told my parents about it, but they thought I was making things up. After all, I was a 13-year-old boy, and I shouldn't be this scared, right? After hours of begging my parents to take me with them, I got frustrated and angry, so I decided to swallow my fears and face whatever the night would bring. Also, the fact that our neighbors, the Petersons, were just a few steps away made me feel so much better. I wasn't alone after all. Or was I? That evening, I bid my parents farewell in the driveway and headed straight to the house. As I was about to step into the house, I felt someone's presence behind me. My legs suddenly became numb as I summoned courage to turn back. To my greatest surprise, it was Mrs. Peterson. I was so relieved. She looked really excited as she gave me a big hug and told me that I had nothing to worry about. I let out a sigh of relief as I made my way into my house and locked the main door. Maybe I was just overreacting, I thought. Everything was going to be just fine. I was actually enjoying my time alone. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. I played video games for hours and watched all the shows that Mom never let me watch, even the horror ones. Maybe that was a bad idea. As soon as 11 p.m. clocked, I went to my room to continue playing games, and that was when it all started. First, all the lights in the whole house started flickering. I quickly reached for my reading lamp, and as soon as I turned it on, it started flickering too. What in the world was going on? I was beginning to feel lightheaded, and I couldn't help but imagine the worst. Hopefully, it was just a power surge issue. I started frantically searching for my phone on my bed. I needed to call my parents right away. However, my phone was nowhere to be found. As I was still trying to gain balance, I started hearing sounds outside my window. This time, they were getting louder and louder with every passing second. It sounded like someone was walking towards my room window. At this point, my heart was racing so fast. I literally felt every heartbeat beating against my chest. So much that it began to hurt. I fell into a sitting position on my bed and closed my eyes, hoping that this was all a dream or some kind of prank. Nothing prepared me for what I saw when I opened my eyes again. I raised my head up, and to my greatest surprise, Danny was standing right in front of me. I was still scared, but even more surprised to see him. "How did you get in here, Danny?" I asked him. I didn't understand why my best friend was looking at me so strangely. He showed no emotion on his face, and the gaze in his dark eyes pierced through me. He raised his arms as if to grab me and started walking towards me. I was confused and asking him what he was doing. Danny grabbed my neck and squeezed hard. I could feel my blood pumping in my eyes. I could hardly breathe. I tried to push him off, but his grip was so strong as a man's. I tried to scream, but my voice would not come out. What in the world was going on? I was in complete shock as I tried to kick him off. I was more scared than I had ever been. I was so afraid that my feet wouldn't move. I seemed to be planted on the spot. Blood gushed all over the place, but he didn't seem to care. After what seemed a very long time, he let go and started to walk quickly towards the window. Danny had become a creature with such deep black eyes that held so much evil. He stared deep into my eyes, almost like he could see my soul. At this point, I was scared to death. Of course I would be. Death was staring me right in the face. I summoned courage to run for my life. I fled straight into my parents' room and locked the door. I still didn't feel safe at all, so I decided to slide under their bed for cover. Just as I was beginning to feel a sense of safety, what felt like a large hand grabbed my leg and dragged me out from under the bed. I glanced at who pulled me, and it was Danny. "Danny!" I yelled, but whatever was dragging me from under the bed with super strength didn't seem like Danny. It didn't even seem human. I dug my nails to the wooden floor as he dragged me. The more he dragged, the more the wood got under my fingers. I was in so much pain, and all I could do was scream. I screamed at the top of my lungs. A part of me was hoping that someone would hear me and come to my rescue. The monster dragged me all the way to the living room. Who would have thought that today would be my last? This would be the day the darkness would cave in on me. As soon as the monster flung me to the middle of the living room, I knew it was over for me. The next thing I heard was the doorbell. Were those the Petersons? Did they hear me scream? Did they come to save me? I was thinking of a way to get them in without the monster noticing when I realized that the monster was beginning to act uneasy. His giant feet were pacing up and down, and I instantly saw it as an opportunity to run to the door. As I charged the door, he followed me. I finally got to the door and flung it open as I fell into the arms of Mr. Peterson. I was finally free. My guardian angels were here to save me. I held tightly and tried to explain what had happened, but as soon as I looked up, I heard Mrs. Peterson say the words, "Well done, Danny. You did a good job." No! Fear flushed through me as I saw a crowd of people behind the Petersons. Some were wearing cloaks with hoods, some without. The people were holding daggers, lanterns, knives, and firewood. I immediately fell straight to the ground. Mr. Peterson grabbed me forcefully and threw me over his shoulder as Mrs. Peterson directed the crowd of a dozen people into the house. They took me into the basement and covered my mouth so no one else would hear my screams. The strangers quickly stacked up the firewood and tied my hands and legs with ropes. I laid there completely disabled. I could not speak or hear. All I could feel was my blood, sweat, and tears. As soon as they placed me on a stack of wood, They lit a fire under it and began chanting and walking around me. I closed my eyes as one of them approached me with a dagger wrapped in red. I was heaving and breathing heavily, but I had resigned to my fate. I took what I thought was my last breath and closed my eyes again, bracing for the pain of the stab. I woke up on the living room floor to the sound of my dad's car horn. I don't know how I got there or how long I had been there. I looked around and saw no one. The ropes, daggers, the crowd, the wounds were all gone. I laid there in shock and confusion. I couldn't move an inch. I watched as my parents dragged their luggage into the house. They thought I had fallen asleep while watching TV. My dad tapped me until he saw that my eyes were open. I didn't act happy to see them, but they were too overwhelmed to notice the shock on my face. They told me they had been calling to find out how I was doing, but when I didn't pick up, they had called our neighbors and they said I was okay. Our neighbors came in later that day to welcome my parents and acted normally with me. Even Danny looked like his normal self, and I felt like I was running out of my mind. I screamed and ran for my life when I saw them. I explained what had happened to my parents, but no one believed me. They said it was the horror movies that gave me such nightmares. I refused to come out of the house or see any of my neighbors, especially not Danny. My parents think I'm going a little insane, but I know what I saw. You may be thinking the same too. It was the horror movies. I'm just a child with an active imagination. But you weren't there that night. You weren't.